All right, let's talk a little bit about CSS. So we've done some HTML, and we've worked with header tags and body tags and paragraphs and tables and forms, and we've just been doing plain HTML using the default rendering in the browser. But if we want to change things like colors and bolding and alignment, using width information and building columns and things like that, then we need to use CSS. So we're going to explore a little bit about CSS and how to do it with some very simple examples. So first thing I've done is I've built a folder structure here. So I have my index.html right here, and I have my images folder that I'm going to put all my images in. And then I have a CSS folder. So I've created a second subfolder where I'm going to put all my CSS. Now you can put style in a couple of different places within the HTML. We're going to look at a few of those, but really the best case is to put it into a CSS, into a separate file, and then include it in your code. So let's build out just a simple HTML file so that we can start experimenting. So I'm going to use my exclamation point to get my default, and I'm going to say, and I'm just going to give this a quick name. This is going to be my title. Then my body, I'm just going to put some basic stuff in here. I'm going to put an H1, and then I'm going to put a paragraph. Okay, and then I'm going to put, let's see, we should get an image there. Let's see, I have an image here. I'll just make a copy of this banner image and move it into this folder so that we can use that there. Okay. All right. So now I've got this banner image, and I can just go ahead and include that with my image tag. Image source equals, using a relative link, images / banner. We'll rename that to banner.jpg. Okay. All right. So now here's my index. Oops, need to close that. Notice how I had the body tag turned red. That's usually an indication that I'm doing something wrong. In this case, I've missed the closing symbol on the image tag. So, all right. So now I have this very simple file. Let's go ahead and open that up in our browser. Okay, and we can see we've got the H1, we've got a paragraph, and we've got this giant image. Okay. All right, so a couple of things that we want to explore here. First is how you pick what CSS is and how you pick it. So the first thing you want to be able to know is what are the things about an element that you can style. So in this case, this is an H1 tag. So if I just come in here and I say W3 schools H1 CSS, okay, then what I can get, I'll get a whole list of all the things that I can style with the H1 tag. I get a nice little AI response there. I can also go to W3 schools, and this in W3 schools, this is one of the better references for HTML on the internet. And so you can look, here's the H1 to H6 tags. You can scroll down here and you can see all of the usage. You can see which browsers it's supported in. You can see events. We'll get to this later when we start in JavaScript. But what you can really get is all the CSS that applies generally to this. So here we have the display, the font size, the font weight, the margin. You can do color on this. So, it's a text box, so you can use color on it. But you get a lot of things that you can, where you can see what all of the CSS elements that are being applied here. Okay. You can also come into CSS on W3 and you can go show me the text, and you can say, here's all the things that are going to apply to text: color, background colors, etc. So you can always look for for the CSS tags that are going to apply, and then you can always just search for it. So how do I style H1 to be red? Okay, when you search that, you'll get a very nice response using an inline style, using the color tag. make it red. Okay, so if you're ever looking for what is the style attribute and the options that you can use, just Google it. You'll get it. There's hundreds of sites out there. W3 Schools, the AI tools. You're going to find something very, very simply. So, okay, so let's play around with where to put the style in the code. So, first thing you can do is you can put style in line. So I could create an attribute here on the H1 tag, and I can make, say, turn that red. Now the format here for style is to say style attribute, and then I have the attribute I want to set, and then I have the value I want to set it to. Okay. So if I save this and reload my page, we see that my header has turned red. Okay. Now in the color tag, I have a couple of different options here. I can use red. There's other ones like green. There's a couple of built-in things that I can use here. See how that's working. And notice that I'm getting these little VS Code is giving me a little help here for the elements. Okay. I can use an RGB color. Here, this is red, green, blue. So these are saturation values that I can use. So if we save that and reload, you see this is kind of a dark blue. And I can also use hex codes. So a hex code being something like this. F5, F5, F5. And then that's basically gonna be white. So you probably won't even be able to see that. You can kind of see it a little bit. It's not quite white, but it's very light. Okay, so you can either use some of the built-in standards, red, green, blue, yellow, light blue, gray, things like that, or you can use the RGB codes, or you can use the hex codes. You can also do RGB, and you can say, let's say it's let's do 100. Okay, let's just do that. I'm not quite sure what color that is, some kind of grayish color. Then you can also come in and you can, and from here you can actually give it transparency. So if I wanted to make it half transparent, then I can come in and notice that it will get lighter here. So that's how so there's a lot of options that you can use in color. Okay, but the point is that you can do it here in the style. So let's just go back to red, just to make it simple. Okay, so you can put this right in line for style, and you can make it red. So this is the least good way to do this. It's very brittle. It's hard to change. If you have a bunch of stuff styled red with attributes on the tags, and you want to change everything that's from red to blue or something like that, it gets very complex. There's a lot of code here. You have a lot of duplication. You don't want to do that. Okay, so we're not doing that. We're not doing inline style. Now, what you can also do is you can put a style tag in the header. So you can come in here and say, this is style. And then in here, I can use a selector. And if you read the Odin project listing, you'll understand selectors. Selector says, what do I want to apply style to? So I can say to all the H1s, I want to apply color of blue. Okay. Now this is called embedded style. So this means that it is embedded in the HTML document itself. This is better than putting it as an inline tag, because you be able to do applications across the board. So in this case, it changes all the H1s. So if I had multiple H1s or multiple paragraphs, I'm not going to have multiple H1s, but if I had multiple paragraphs, I only have to put one style code here instead of doing one on each paragraph. So so here we have, so I can just set it to H1, and then when I reload, we see that it turns blue. Okay, so this is okay. Where this breaks down is when you have multiple pages in your website, and you want to have consistent style between all the pages, because this is included in the HTML file itself. If you have multiple pages, multiple HTML files in your project, and you want to use the same style, you have to duplicate this between every page, and that gets hard to change, et cetera, et cetera. So the answer is to create an external CSS file. So I'm going to come into my CSS folder here that I have. And I'm going to create a file, and we're going to call it week7.css, and that is in the wrong folder. So let me put it in there. So that's going to be in my CSS folder. Okay. So we see here that I've got index in the root of my folder. I've got an images folder with a banner in it, and I have a CSS folder with a file that I've named week7.css. Now, when I name this .css, the VS Code is going to interpret it as being a style sheet. This CSS stands for cascading style sheet. And so I'm going to put that in the separate file. I'm going to then link that into my HTML, and then I'll be able to apply it to whatever HTML file I have in my project. Okay, so now how do I link this? So first thing is, let's go ahead and put some style in here. So let's copy our H1 tag. Let's just take it out of the HTML. I just cut that out of the HTML. Let's just paste it in here. We don't need the style tag here. You just need the CSS. So because this is CSS file, you don't need any kind of tags or elements or anything like that. You just need to do the selector and the attribute and the value that you're styling. So if I save this, I haven't done the link yet. So if I go back to my file, we'll notice that my style is not being applied. My header is just the default black, and my style sheet says it should be blue. Okay, that's because I haven't linked it in. So I need to do an include of some kind into this file. So what I want to do is I want to come up here, and to link a style sheet, I use a link tag, and I'm going to say link, and it's going to say rel equals style sheet. So this says what kind of link is this, and then I'm going to give it an href. So in this case, it's an href, not a source, but it's still going to work the same way with a relative address. Okay, so even though it's href instead of source, it's still going to just use the relative tag, same as a link would, or as an image would, only using the href instead of the source. So now my style sheet is included in my file. So now when I go back and load my page, my header turns blue again. Okay, so this is how we're going to do style. We're always going to do it in a separate CSS file. Okay, so now let's make our page a little more complicated, and then let's style up a few things here. Okay, so first thing is I really need to have more than one paragraph, and they probably need to be a little longer in order for me to be able to experiment with this. Now I could write some paragraphs here, which works just fine, but there is a set of there's a utility for website designers and other graphic designers called lorem ipsum. This is just it's a nonsense language, and it designed to look real, even though it's completely nonsense. So you just type lorem ipsum into your browser, and you can get a lorem ipsum generator, and you can read about it here if you want. But I come in here and I say I want 2 paragraphs of lorem ipsum, and here's my paragraph. So now I can just copy these. I can just copy that and paste it into my paragraph. Okay, so now I have a longer paragraph here. Let's just do both of them. You see, it looks like a real paragraph. It kind of looks like Latin. It's not. It's completely made up in gibberish, but it looks like an actual paragraph. It's got kind of standard word lengths and sentence lengths and punctuation and things like that. So it makes it easy to use as a placeholder if you are trying to do some design layouts and things like that. Okay, so we can come back in. Let's look at my. So here are 2 paragraphs here. Okay, so now I want to style these paragraphs. So what do we want to do is let's just make the whole thing. Let's make it so that it's doesn't take up the whole width of the screen. So we'll just play around with a couple of different styling techniques here. Okay, so some of the style tags that we want to use. So for styling text, you can do things like color of the text. You can do font weights, which makes it bolder or lighter. You can do font sizes. You can do alignment. So if you want to make it, this is currently left aligned. It's all aligned to the left. You can make it full so that it's justified on both sides. You can center it on the page, things like that. You can put a border around it. You can set margin and padding so that you can increase the space that's in between, that's in between the the paragraphs here. So let's just play around with some stuff and just kind of see what it does. So first things first is let's just put a border around this paragraph and see what it looks like. So how do I do a border? So let's just come to CSS. We can say paragraph. I'm just going to Google it and we'll see paragraph border. Okay, and here it is. The border has its standard. So the border is actually has border width, border style, and border color. So I can do that in individuals, border width, border style, border color as the attributes. 2 pixels is what this means. Dashed or solid would be these options, and then border color blue or using a hex code or something like that. So, or I can do it all in one line with the single attribute border 1 pixel solid black. Okay, so let's do this. Let's make it 1 pixel solid and let's make it green just so that we can see it. So I want to do that on the paragraph. So in my CSS, let's come in here and let's put paragraph. That's my selector. So I want to select all the paragraphs and then I want to apply this style. Border equals 2 pixels solid green. Okay. And notice when I type that, let me erase that and type it again. Notice that when I type that, my I'm getting some type ahead. Okay, so I'm getting some help from Visual Studio Code to help me kind of understand what my options are going to be then. Now when I reload this, I get a green border around this. So now I also want to make this so that it's not the full width of the screen. So I can do that in a couple of different ways. I can come in and say for paragraphs, I want to make it width. I want to make it 50%. So I could just say make it 50% of the page width. Okay. I can also do that in actual pixels. So make it 65 pixels. That's going to be very narrow. Okay. So typically you're going to use percentages. Sometimes you might have a larger. So let's say we wanted to do. Well, it's a good time to talk about looking at the inspector panel. So this is how it looks on my desktop. But if I wanted to see how it's going to look on a mobile device, I can use the inspection panel built into Chrome. There's an inspection panel built into every browser, but we're going to use the one in Chrome. So I can simply right click on the element I want to inspect, and I click inspect. Okay, let's do that again. So we right click, click inspect, and then I get this inspection panel that comes up down at the bottom. Now this panel is going to have a bunch of different things. It's going to show me here's the different elements that I have here. And notice that when I highlight an element, notice how at the top it highlights in blue, and it's got this kind of orangey red color that goes around it. That is the border and the padding that goes around it. So that's the separation. Okay. You can come over here and you can click on the computed. If you click on styles, you can see all the styles that are being applied to this. So here's the default style that says this is the user agent. This is the default style that applies to the paragraph. And then we see here's style coming out of week7.css. This is the style that I put in. You can also come in and you can just edit these. So I can just come in here and press the up arrow. And I can just kind of play with the style. Now, when I do this, it is adjusting the style on my rendered page. My actual file is unchanged. So I'm not changing my CSS file. I'm just changing the copy that the browser has loaded. Okay, so I can leave that. I can just turn it off completely just by clicking the X, etc. Okay, I can add a new one that says color blue, pink, whatever I want. So you can really play around with the style. You can also use this computed tab, and you can come in and see that it will, when I have computed, it will show me what the padding is. So you can see, notice that the colors of over here in this are matching what's being shown. So when I'm highlighted over here, this is the contents, this is the inner content, what's called the inner HTML of this element for the paragraph. And if I go up, here's the padding. There is 0 padding on this. Here's my border. Okay, we can see, if you notice, it's being highlighted in the top. Notice how it's changing colors, and then here's my margin. Okay, so we can see that the margin is being adjusted. So I can come in and adjust padding. So we can say, come in and show, put the padding on this at, let's do 25 pixels. And notice it gets bigger. Padding is the space between the inner HTML of the element and the edge, the inner edge of the element. So you see this border is the edge of this paragraph element. So by increasing the padding, I'm increasing the space in between the border and the inside content. That's padding. And we can see I can make that go higher, okay, and lower, okay. And then I can also I can adjust what's called margin. The margin is the space outside the border. So it's the space between the outside of the border and the other elements around it. So I can put margin in here, put margin in at 25 pixels, and notice now that the margin, that the elements are getting further away. So I can increase that. Notice how the inner HTML stays the same distance from the border, but the elements outside get further away. So that allows me to do spacing on the page using padding and margin. And padding is inside the element, margin is space outside the element between other elements. Okay, now again, if I just reload this page, it's all going to go away because I put the padding and the margin in my inspector panel here, not in the CSS. Now the inspector panel is really good because it lets me kind of fool around with stuff and kind of see how it looks on the page, and then once I get it the way I want, I can go and put it into the HTML. There's a special case for margin called auto, which will automatically center. So if you do a margin auto, what that does is it will pick, it will automatically put margin on both sides of the element so that the element itself is centered in the page. Okay, so that's a special value. You can also do margin in if you just Google it, you can get all the formats. But there's a couple of ways to do it. You can say if you use just margin, then you get 20 pixels. Then this is margin top, right, bottom, left, all at one time. Okay, if you do 2 values, then you get top and bottom at 15 and right and left at 30. You can also do all 4. So in this case, 5, 10, 15, 20, this starts at the top. So this is margin 5, then going clockwise around. This is the right side, the bottom, and the left side. So if we wanted to, for example, come back here and say, I want to center this. So that's going to be top, and so I'm going to do the 2 elements. I want the top and the bottom to be 15 pixels, and I want it to be auto on the right and left. So then I can put some separation in between my paragraphs, and I can center everything on that. Okay, so now, how do we actually put this in the CSS? Okay, so let's go ahead and say here, I want my margin. And you see here my options. I can do margin top, bottom, left, right. I can do them one at a time. I can do them all together in a couple of ways. So let's say margin, I want the top margin to be 35 pixels, the top and the bottom, and I want the right and left to be auto. So now when I reload this, they're 35 pixels apart, and it's going to be centered in the page. Okay, now let's go ahead and center this header as well. So to center the header, what I can do is we can fool around with this. We can come in here and say inspect the header. So now it's highlighted here in my elements tab, and I can say text align center, and that's going to center the element that I have there. Okay, now my paragraph is still left justified, but I can come in here on my paragraph, click in, and I can say text align, and here I can say justify. So now it's going to be even on both sides, or I can say right. and it's going to center, it's going to justify it to the right. So however you want here, center, whatever you want is what you want to do there. Okay. All right. All right. So now let's go back and let's see, reload this. Let's go ahead and center the header in our CSS. So up here I can just say text align center, and let's go ahead and make that a different font. So there's some fonts built into the browser. So if you want to use really, oddball fonts, you typically have to download those, put them in your project, and then include them in the using a link or an include file of some kind in HTML. But in this case, we have some default fonts, so we can just Google what those are, and we can say what's built into Chrome. And we can see that here's a bunch of different fonts built into Chrome. So Arial, sans serif. So these are the order that the fonts will be applied in. I want Arial. If it's not available, use sans serif, etc. So there's a bunch of fonts built in. We could try the Courier font. Let's see if that works. Font family, Courier. Oops. I don't know if that's built in or not. That may not work. Yeah, that works. So there's a Courier font. We could try Helvetica. There's a Helvetica. There's a sans serif is the default. We could do Arial like that. Let's see, Roboto. Roboto is not built in. So, but you can adjust the font family there however you want. Okay. So let's go ahead and let's reload this. So here's our header centered. Let's go back to our spreadsheet and let's just set the font for the whole page, which we'll just use using the body selector. And we'll just say font family. And let's just make it, oops, misspelled that. Let's just make it Courier. Okay. So then when we reload that, we get everything in a Courier font. Okay. Let's go ahead and put some padding in here just to make it look interesting. Padding works the same as margin. I can do it one value for padding all around, or I can use the top, bottom, right, left, etc. That I want. So let's just put a little padding. Let's put 20 pixels of padding in there, just to put some space in between the border. Okay, and we can keep going. So now let's go ahead and go down and look at the image. So we have this image. Before we were using the inline tags on the image file, we were using width right here as an attribute. That is still supported, but that is not the approach that we should be using. So we should really be doing all of our styling using some kind of CSS. So here, let's come in and let's just say I want the image, and I want all the images to be, let's just say 300 pixels wide. Okay. Now when I load the image, it's going to be 300 pixels wide. Let's see if the text align works. Okay, now that didn't work. Text align, so even if we look at the value there, okay, we can inspect that image and we can see that it's applied text align center, but it didn't do anything. Okay, so why is that? Well, it's because the image, there's nothing to align. The image is the text align doesn't work on the image. So what you have to do is you have to put the image into another container and then text align the container. So for that, we can use a div tag. And so we can come in here, we can create a div. A div is just an empty container. It just allows us to group elements together so that we can apply style. We can use this to build columns, to adjust style when we're loading on a laptop versus when we're loading in a mobile device, a smaller screen. So we can go ahead and load that. This is still not going to center, okay? But what we want to do is we want to actually put the we want to put the text align on a div. Let's see if that works. So if we come in and say text align center here, now that's going to work. So because now what we're centering is the div tag, everything inside the div container is going to be centered. So because the image is inside the div container, it will be centered. You can't center the image itself because the image is not contained in anything. It's just an image. So there's nothing to center it in. So so we have to put that into a container, in this case, a div, and then you can center that. Now we can also say, let's make two divs here. So we'll have two images. Now notice that when I do, let's put it into our CSS, the text align here on the image is not going to work. Div, text align center. So now those are centered, but maybe I don't want to center both of them. I just want to center the first one. Okay, so now how do I center one and not the other? Well, now I have to separate, because this is being applied to all divs and all images. It's selecting everything. My selector is very broad, but if I want to treat these things differently, I have to identify them differently. So here I could say, I can use an attribute, either an ID or a class. So if I have an ID is a unique identifier. So if I give the div an ID, this is like giving it a unique key. So so here we can give it that's image 2, and then here this is going to be ID equals image 1. Okay. Now I don't want to use numbers here. If you can use numbers, but I don't like to. And if you have multiple words, you can separate them with a dash or a hyphen. Okay, so now those are still centered. But if I come in here and I say I just want to center the bottom, the image 2. Well, let's say I'm just going to center image 1. So I can select using the hashtag or the £, and that will say for all the elements that have the ID of image 1, I want text align center, but for the ones that don't, I don't. So now the image 1 div is centered, but the image 2 div is not. Okay. I can also come in here and say for this, let's make this width. So the image is 300 pixels, but let's make the div 600 pixels, and let's set the background color to be red. That's going to look terrible. Okay, but we see here that it is centering, and then if I want to center that fully on the page, notice it's not centered on the page anymore, but the image is centered in the div, and the div is 600 pixels wide, and the image is 300 pixels wide. So now if I want to center that whole thing on the page, I can just say margin auto, and it's going to center. Okay. All right. So that's how you can go in and select and pick individual values. Now I can also pick based on classes. So instead of using an ID, needs to be unique. So if I give an ID name to an element, I should only use that ID one time in the entire page. Okay, an ID is a unique identifier. But what I can also do is I can create a class, and I can say this one's going to be centered, and I can say this is going to be fully justified. Okay, so now if I use the class, oops, let's spell that correctly. Okay, the class will then apply to any element that has that class, and I can put, let's go ahead and we'll just copy these so that we have multiple elements. Now I have 2 centered and 2 fulls. Okay, now if I load this, let's move that down a little bit so we can see. Notice I have 4 paragraphs now. They're all centered. Okay, but I want the centered paragraphs to be centered, and I want the full paragraphs to be fully justified. So I can come back here to my selectors, and I can say for my paragraphs, we can say text align center, and I can say, so now I'm using the period. this means that for all paragraphs that have the class of centered, I want to apply these values. For the ones that don't have centered, I don't want to apply any values. So now these that are marked as full no longer have any style applied to them. Okay. So now what we can do is we can come in and we can say, okay, I want to apply, I can just copy this, and to the full, then I can say this is going to be justify. Okay. So now that'll be fully justified. And see how this text is centered in its box, but this text is justified even on both sides on the box. Okay, so I can set a class on multiple elements, and then I can style those using that accordingly. So now, and this is a compound selector. So this says for all paragraphs that have the centered class, set it this way. But this doesn't really make sense because I've duplicated a lot here. So the only thing that's different between these two is the text align. All the other stuff is the same. So what I can do, what I should do is instead of duplicating all that, I'm just going to say, look, I want my paragraphs to look like this. So we can put our paragraphs back and we take the text align out. And then here we just say, just for centered, set this, and just for full. So now my paragraph, all paragraphs will get these 4 values. And anything that has the centered class will also get this value. Anything that has full class will also get this value. Okay. And then I can come in and we see that it's still working just fine. Okay. I can also apply the centered down here to the image, because on this image 1, I've centered this. Okay. But I already have a class that will do that. So what I could do is I could just delete that. I could delete the text align from my image 1 div. And notice when I do that, the image is no longer centered in the div. So I want to center this image, and the div is the red box. I want to center this image. So what I can do is I can come in here on my image 1 and I can apply a class to be centered. Okay. So now that text align that's in my centered selector on my CSS is going to apply to any element that has the class of centered applied to it. Okay. All right. So that was a lot of information really fast. If you go through and read, you can follow these examples. You can go through and read the CSS lesson in the Odin project, which will cover a lot of this information, and will give you some more insight. And from all that, you should be able to complete the assignment. The assignment will just require you to create a page with a couple of paragraphs and a list and a few images, and to apply some kind of style to all of those, showing that you have figured out how to use the selectors. All right, I hope this helps. If you need any help, feel free to reach out to me on Canvas.